right here where you're standing. There was a fella up the river from here. His name was Frank. And when you cross rivers and streams, it was called fording the river. Frank's Ford became Frank Ford. Okay, and back during the time that they were trying to, Kentucky was divided. So there's an old military museum up on the side of the hill overlooking the river, and that was there to protect this area. And it's an old military museum. It's pretty cool inside. You go and look at some of the little artifacts and stuff from years gone by. But Frankfurt was a really interesting place. But it helps you to understand why whiskey was so important. Okay? You look at that picture, and it looks like a bunch of old whiskey guys. So back in the day, I was telling my grandson Osiris, I said, you know, back in the day, and he started laughing at me. And I said, now what is so funny about what I said? I said, well, you know, back in the day when you turn the pages of history, he just started rolling. I said, what are you laughing about? What am I saying so funny? He said, well, first off, back in the day tells me that you're going to come out with something old. And he says that when you told me to flip the pages of history, he said, that did it. I said, what do you mean? He said, Papa, we don't turn pages anymore. I said, well, flip your iPad over. I said, work with your granddad.
Swipe left.
Yeah. Scroll left, scroll right. So the deal is, you have to look at that, and every person in the picture is holding the tool of their family's trade. That's what's so important about the picture. They weren't just a bunch of old whiskey folks. Everybody had a purpose. The term is called we take care of our own. So that door that you walk through, that picture was taken there in the mid-1800s. Yeah, slavery hadn't even been abolished when that picture was taken, and those guys have been working together for years. So you have to look closely at the picture and you'll understand some things. In New York, they always joke about the Irish or the firemen. They're the firemen, right? Well, they really were. You have to understand something. So remember, we were talking about those stills, pot stills and column stills, right? Well, there's two ways to spell whiskey. K-Y and K-E-Y. But why? Why? Because we like you. No, Mickey Mouse humor. You know, M-I-C-K-E-Y. Why? Because we like you, right? Oh, God. Oh, so one day you have Mickey, the next day you have Goofy. That'd be me. So anyway, well, the deal, though, is this. What most people don't realize, the traditional way of making whiskey was a pot still. That's the way it all got started. But it doesn't matter whether you're using a pot still or a column still. What is important is you have to understand how to bank a fire underneath that still to get a uniform heat, because that is critical in the whiskey coming off the still, and the whiskey comes off the still based on temperature inside the still. So if you're inconsistent with your heat pattern, you're going up and down, which really is not going to be very good whiskey. So if you bank it a certain way, you get a consistent heat, which allows the still to operate at a certain proof. All right, so that's the beauty of what the Irish knew how to do. They knew how to build fires. So it was a joke. Most people didn't understand what was going on, but the two guys on the left are Irish, and they're holding coal and shovels. They are your firemen. Column stills are critical for that. So what most people don't realize is they're called continuously operating stills. So you have to know how, it's like running a steam locomotive. You have to know how to bank that fire so that that steam is consistent. And that steam is what's going to make your whiskey, all right? So the way that a column still works is that mash is going in at the top. Alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, so what's actually happening is that mash comes down through that still. It's absorbing part of that heat. And in the process of absorbing the heat, it's releasing the alcohol. And the alcohol is going out the top. The mash, the water and particulates are going down to the bottom. It's a pretty cool process. So when you understand that, it begins to make sense what they're doing. So column stills are actually known as continuously operating stills. But the proper name for the still is a coffee still. C-O-F-F-E-Y, named after the Irishman who invented it. Isn't that kind of crazy? So bagpipes and column stills were both created by the Irish, hence K-E-Y, the Irish way. KY, the Scottish way. So here of late, people have said, oh, it's based on the flags. Have you heard this one? That's the latest one. They said, yeah. So the Scottish way, you know, this is the areas that the Scottish were in, so that's why it's spelled KY. And then the Irish way is they showed their flag and they said United States is kind of, and I'm like, where did y'all get that? Other one said, well, you know, it's based on whether or not it was made in Kentucky. I said, what? He said, yeah, KY means it's come from Kentucky. And then where are y'all coming up with
Facebook?
Facebook. Or Google. They probably Wikipedia, whatever you call it. The point is that it doesn't matter which still you use. It's how you use that still that's critical. All right? And you think about all these really good bourbons and whiskeys that are coming out now. That's like Holland designed his, which is a hybrid. It's a mix of a pot still and a column still, but you still know how to have to know how to use them. Okay? That's what this is about. So every person in the picture is a master of their trade, and it's part of the whiskey making process. So I wish we had more time, but I'm gonna show you this just real quick. See the guy sitting down next to the barrel? If you look closely, he's holding a wood plane in his hand. He is your cooper. Cooper in early European days, if you go back and look at it, it didn't mean barrel maker. That's what people assume. Cooper actually means a worker of wood. They were carpenters and cabinet makers and furniture makers. That's why they knew how to make a barrel out of white oak rather than another type of wood. White oak is it's got some special properties. It's called telosis, but they're little bars that run crossways of the grain. Water molecules are smaller, so when you put your whiskey into the barrel and the whiskey warms up inside the barrel like a 2-liter soda bottle, it's building up pressure. It pushes the whiskey out into the wood. Water molecules are smaller. They escape out into the atmosphere. Angel share. It's a water vapor. So when it cools back down or when the barometric pressure changes, it creates a vacuum as the molecules contract. Pulls the whiskey back the other way. And when it does that, it brings with it those caramelized sugars and flavors where the alcohol has been breaking them down in the wood itself. So what happens is your volume is going down because you're losing water, but the concentration of alcohol and flavors and color are going up. So your trade-off is, how long do I want to leave the whiskey in the barrel to get the flavors that I'm looking for, recognizing that at the same time I'm doing that, I'm getting down close to the bottom. And when I get down there too far, the oak becomes a dominant factor, and that's where your tannins kick in, and that's the kind of like that dry, eating on a walnut kind of a thing gets in your mouth. Kind of cool?
Yeah. Cool.
And since we were talking about yeast, look at all the way over the guy on your right, that with that funny-looking hat on his head.
Yes.
That's your microbiologist. Looks crazy as a June bug, but he's your fermentation guru. He's holding a yeast tub in his hand. He's critical to your business. And look at the two guys with the derbies on. One's a white one for the white community, and the guy behind him, he's your African American businessman. Those are your marketing folks. And he's doing something kind of slick in the picture.
What's the guy doing that's holding the dog?
I'm getting ready to take it. Remember this? So most people didn't even realize that the first animals to race in Kentucky were not horses. They were dogs. Greyhounds and Whippets are Welsh dogs, and it was called a rag race. And back in the day, now they use that old rabbit that flops around, but back in the day it was a rag. And a guy would go down to the far end of the field, and you'd have your dogs ready, and when they basically released the dog, the first dog that grabbed the rag out of the guy's hand was the winner. It was called a rag race. Horse racing came about because they were floating down the river with whiskey barrels. They had to get home. Everybody knew you, just kind of like NASCAR. They knew you had whiskey, you've been selling it, you got money. I got to get you. So you had to be able to outrun those people pursuing you. Rafts going down, horses coming back, and all of a sudden horse racing replaces dog racing in Kentucky. Isn't it kind of crazy?